Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Knife Chats with Tobias.
Well, if you got this far and you read the title or even the description, you know that this knife is about the TL-29 and other knives that are commonly referred to as a TL-29. When I started this video, I had no intention of actually going into the history of the pattern, but I did delve into it a little bit in this video, and in some cases I might have actually got some of the information incorrect or at least misleading. And this happens when I begin the video with one thought in mind and then drift into another area before I actually go and take a look at my notes. Now, there was a glaring error when I was talking about the Klein Tool Electrician knife that would definitely be misleading. So I have added an explanation at that point to try and clarify what I was actually talking about. And I have since gone back to some of my sources and looked it over and have not seen anything else that was really glaringly wrong. But there are still a few things that I think could stand a little correcting. And so what I will do is release a more accurate history of the TL-29 linesman knife as used by the U.S. military in the near future. But really the main focus of this video is the overuse of the term TL-29 when people are referring to an electrician knife. And as the video focuses primarily on that and covers that pretty well, I figured I would go ahead and publish this video as is with this statement at the beginning so that you would understand where I'm coming from and the fact that I do know that there are some issues with the overall history of the pattern, but those will be addressed in a future video.
I finally managed to snag a wood-covered World War II era electrician knife, or TL-29, or linesman knife, whatever you want to call it. The TL stands for tool linesman. The 29 refers to the pattern number of the knife that was used by the U.S. Army. All of these electrician knives tend to be called a TL-29. I'll get into that in a little bit. But in any case, this is a pretty good example. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's pretty good. Someone did attempt to clean it up a bit, and they might have cleaned it a little more than they should have. But it looks pretty good. Got the, I believe this is a nickel-silver clevis, nickel-silver bolster. You got the brass liners and brass pins, and as I mentioned, it's wood covers on it, and it's clearly stamped TL-29, and you have the blades of a electrician knife or TL-29, and you notice you've got the locking screwdriver with the wire stripper right there, and then the main blade, which is the long spear blade. This one I would say is about 90% full. You can see it's got quite a bit of pitting that was on there, and you can see where it read Ulster Knife USA. And as I mentioned, this is one from World War II era. I believe it was probably made in 41 or 42. It might have even been made before the war. Clearly marked TL-29. And this is the first wood-covered TL-29 that I have. I also have another TL-29. I don't think I've ever shown this one, or if I have not really talked about it much. I really need to review both of these knives more thoroughly than what I'm doing right now. This one is also clearly marked TL-29, and this has the heavy black Delrin handles. You notice the carbon steel back springs and the brass liners and brass spacer in the middle, and well, again with the screwdriver blade, not sharp up here, sharp down here, and you got the wire stripper there. If you notice, both knives have this notch here. That is actually so you can more easily get to the nail nick on the main blade, and you've got the brass liner down the middle. Not much of a change in the knife. This one is by Camillus, and if you look at the tang stamp there, what bit of the tang stamp you can see that this is from probably the 1960s or 1970s, and that makes this one basically a Vietnam era TL-29. And as you can tell, it is clearly stamped TL-29. And that's really what I want to get to, is when is an electrician knife a TL-29 and when is it just an electrician knife? For instance, what we have here is a Klein tool 1550 42, and that means that it is the 1550 is used for a variety of knives from Klein. All of these knives, this knife, all of these begin with 1550. This one is -42. It could also be a -2 depending on what kind of steel is used in it. If it's stainless steel, it's just a 1550-2. If it's carbon steel, as this one is, then it's a 1550-42 electrician knife or two-blade knife. Sometimes that's all they refer to it as. And you notice it's different than either of these knives, at least when you look at the handle material. This knife, this particular one, was probably made by Camillus, the same company that made this knife. And depending on which knife you're looking at in the Camillus lineup, Camillus has numerous pattern numbers for their different electrician knives, depending on what kind of cover they have on it. If it's the black cover, it'll have a different model number than the ones with the brown wood grain cover, which is actually made of Delrin. Both of them are Delrin. So they have different pattern numbers for them. A lot of people, when selling these knives on eBay, though, will refer to any of these knives as a TL-29. And matter of fact, that's a great way to search for these knives, is type in TL-29 electrician knife, and you'll get a variety of them popping up. And you see here, blade-wise, blades are the same. Nothing much has changed about this knife at all. It's basically an electrician knife, your basic electrician knife, like all of these other ones are. And so why wouldn't a person call it a TL-29? Well, that's where it gets kind of tricky. But for the serious collector of TL-29s, the ones who are actually looking for the military issued knives, they're going to want it to say something like TL-29 on the cover. Have it stamped in there, or some of the other official markings that are known to have existed, especially on World War II versions of these knives. Some of them will have a metal shield or a nickel silver shield that has TL-29 on it. Some of them will also have branches of services on there. For instance, it'll be marked U.S. Army, or it'll be marked engineers or something like that, plus USN, USMC, so on and so forth. And that's what the serious collector of the military issued TL-29s is looking for. And this is a little bit of a point of contention for me, because not every TL-29 knife was marked. And also, after World War II, quite a few TL-29 knives, the war ended in 1945 kind of suddenly. They were actually expecting it to go through 1946 and 1947 possibly. And a lot of military contracts were canceled in 1946, including a bunch of TL-29 knives. So I would bet that the makers of those knives, once the contract was canceled, they didn't just say, well, we can't use these knives anymore. They had them. They already had them produced. The U.S. government wasn't going to buy them. So what happened to them. They were sold on the open market in civilian stores and stuff, still stamped TL-29. So there are plenty of TL-21s that never saw service. Plus, because during the war and even after the war, local procurement also took place. So Could a Klein tool knife actually have shown up in a
Okay, remember at the beginning of the video I said I made a glaring error? This is the glaring error. Klein Tools actually made TL-29s during World War II. However, the Klein Tools TL-29 during World War II were stamped M. Klein and Son. They are not the Klein tool knife that you normally run into, which are the ones that were basically subcontracted through Camillus, all the blades and everything coming from Camillus or also Utica. Those are the ones that I'm referring to. Basically, the ones from the 1980s and 1990s. Were those being made under U.S. military contract? I do not believe so. However, Klein Tools definitely did make TL-29s during World War II, along with a plethora of other companies and just about any hardware store that was producing knives at the time.
U.S. military linesman kit, the CS-34 linesman kit? I can definitely picture that happening simply because the original was lost and somebody locally procured one to replace it. Sometimes it was just cheaper to go out and pick something up at the hardware store and stick it in there. So, in theory, yes, a Klein, you cannot rule out a Klein tool knife being used in the U.S. military simply through local procurement. But at the same time, that's not the knife that the serious military collector is going to look for. He is going to look for one that has official markings. And so when I'm out searching for these knives, I know that I'm going to find this knife listed as a TL-29, just like I will find this Rough Rider coal miner knife also being called a TL-29. That's just going to happen. Were they truly knives used by the U.S. military? Well, I'm sure the Rough Rider electrician knife, the coal miner electrician knife, is not a U.S. military issued TL-29, and I would bet money that it was not locally procured for one. However, during the Vietnam War, I would not doubt that you would have seen locally procured electrician knives out of Japan, Thailand, and other countries making it into the CS-34 linesman kit. But at the same time, like I'm telling you, that's not what the serious military knife collector is looking for. He's looking for one that will be marked TL-29, even though by the time of the Vietnam War, Camillus was probably supplying them that are not stamped. And just as a side note, you are also going to find knives like this. This is a Klein tool. What is this? I think this is the 1550-6. It's a 3-blade version of a knife with a what looks like a hawkbill blade as a third blade on the knife. They also have this version with just the hawkbill and the screwdriver. These will also be referred to as a linesman knife or a TL-29. That's stretching it a bit, but you will still see people referring to this as like a TL-29 with an extra hawkbill blade or something like that. And same with this knife. This is a Klein Tool TL, 1550-9 with the funky insulation slitting blade on it. And this is also often referred to as a TL-29. And those are a little bit of a stretch for me. I have a harder time accepting that being referred to as a TL-29 as I do just your basic Klein tool knife. But for the serious collector, you can expect to have eyebrows raised if you're referring to this knife by Klein Tool as a TL-29 as opposed to this knife, which is clearly stamped TL-29. And people will often refer to the ones marked as a TL-29 as a linesman knife versus the Klein tool knife here, which is an electrician knife. But if you're looking to buy these knives, especially if you're searching eBay for them, TL-29 is a great term to use for any of these knives. These will show up, but you're going to get a lot of clutter on it also, because this will also show up. If you type in TL-29 linesman knife, you might have better luck with these, but you will also still see these showing up because that's the way people list them. Any case, hope you find this somewhat helpful, especially if you're a person who's collecting the electrician knives. It is a fairly popular pattern among collectors. If you're new to collecting them and you are looking for ones that were military issue or accepted as military issue, try to find the ones that are marked TL-29. They're going to be a little harder to find, and they will be a little more expensive because you will pay more simply because it is stamped TL-29, because the people who are looking for military equipment are going to want the ones that say TL-29, and in open bidding they are willing to pay more. If you are just looking for a nice user beater knife, then this is the one you're going to look for. Just your basic electrician knife by Klein Tool or numerous other companies that make them. The ones that are stamped TL-29, depending on condition, can run easily $15 to $20 more than the ones that are identical to it that are not stamped TL-29. Something to keep in mind when you're out there hunting and pecking around. Unless you come across a person who has no clue what a TL-29 is, in which case they may sell it for cheaper despite having the mark on the handle. In any case, with that said, I will let you go and talk to you again soon. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.